All right, hello, and welcome back to another edition of The Full Ride here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. Oof. Wild weekend in the state of Tennessee. We had Tennessee-Memphis and a scrimmage on Sunday, and that was the only Tennessee athletic program that participated in this beautiful East Tennessee weekend down there in Tequila, Georgia, as he gets ready for a house-divided weekend up ahead on Friday Night Lights with his Tequila, or his now, just by geography, Tequila Falcons going on the road to his alma mater, the North Gwinnett Bulldogs.
Is that right?
Yeah, in round one of their playoff game this weekend.
Didn't even realize.
Well, I'm surprised because I'm sure that the Tequila Kroger is bumping and it's the talk of the town right now. Well, you're a Publix guy. That's probably why you're missing it. You're not there with the people over there in Kroger.
I go back and forth. I'm not. I don't have a go-to. Certain things they got a Publix and things got a Kroger. But you're distracting the people. You're burying the lead here, I think, is what's going on. We had a matchup of number 1 versus number 1 this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we saw who the true number 1 team in the country was, the Georgia Bulldogs. Can we just jump right into it? I feel like this is the elephant in the room right now. It was a huge game, man. Huge atmosphere. Georgia could have, what did Nick Saban say last year? That rat poison was yummy.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you're going to come ready to play regardless, but putting Tennessee number 1 in the polls, putting Eric Ainge putting out some just disrespectful comments about Sanford Stadium, just all the kind of.
But they weren't, because he was 2-0 in Athens. He was 2-0. And it was a very different time. The Mark Richt era during that time period and what Sanford Stadium was at that time was different than what it was on Saturday.
So Eric Ainge could say Sanford Stadium used to not be a tough place to play.
He should have said that.
Used to not be in super loud, because I think there's some truth to that, honestly. But since you're also, if you're playing on Saturday, yeah, go for it. You run your mouth all you want. The team's one that had to back that one up. Obviously, he issued an apology on Twitter, so he had to eat it.
Oh, did he? I didn't even see that
himself, but yeah, it was the Georgia Bulldogs. I think that's what it came down to.
Whew.
I just had this feeling, like I kind of told you about the SEC Championship 2018 and kind of referenced, like, this was the big game of the season. This was everything, and Georgia dialed up pressure nonstop on Hendon Hooker, and you hadn't seen them do that all year. 7 sacks, or I think 10 sacks on the year coming into this game. And they recorded 6, but according to Jake Rowe, I've seen a couple. It's actually 8 sacks, because Tramel Walthour and Ryan Davis both had a sack he shared a GIF of that weren't recorded in the stats for whatever reason. So 8 sacks in this game on Hendon Hooker. I saw Georgia winning battles. Like, kind of what I said. Like, this offense wasn't just going to be unstoppable. I did not see Georgia just absolutely putting on the shackles of this offense. Like, the first 9 drives of the game, they had 6 points, 2 field goals, 2 turnovers, multiple punts. Like, I was really shocked, and I think all of college football was shocked. As a person who thought Georgia would win and thought Georgia's defense could keep up with them, at least limit them, I was still surprised at just how good the Georgia defense really looked. Like, it was, the secondary looked great. The defensive line, like, creating pressure without really blitzing that all that often. And even the corners and the star, Javon Bullard, Jalen Carter just destroys offensive lines. This man, I think, is the best defensive lineman in the country. And this Georgia team, this is what we talked about. Like, this offense, I feel like, just kept being slept on. And you saw, like, kind of you referenced on the podcast before, like, if Georgia's going to win, they got to get these explosive plays in the passing game. And my rebuttal was, no, if Georgia's getting those explosive plays in the passing game, it's going to be a blowout. And that's really what it was. It was domination. You saw the long pass to Arian Smith early, the long one to Ladd McConkey for the touchdown, hitting the backs hitting Kenny McIntosh on a long one. Like, it was just, Stetson Bennett played maybe his best game of the season, probably second best to the Oregon game. He was just after that initial drive where the almost threw just a pick right into the chest of the middle linebacker. After that, I guess it was kind of like the Alabama game, the national championship, where he dropped the ball and was able to recover it. He just needs that one little wake up call early in the game to get his mind right. But yeah, Stetson Bennett making plays with his legs, making plays, hitting deep balls. It was just a great offensive performance and just a ridiculous defensive performance from Georgia.
People even got after me about it's funny you mentioned the deep balls because it's like what I said, where Georgia had to do things that they had just not done, and they did those. So congrats to them. Like Georgia was clearly the better team. Like Georgia's gonna repeat. I think now we're at the point where I don't see a path where Georgia doesn't repeat as national champions. There's just no doubt that they're the most complete team in college football this year. I mean, we really won't get to Ohio State and Northwestern, but they're squeaking through week after week now. Like there is now a just this is the case, and we saw what happened in Michigan and Georgia last year in the Orange Bowl. We'll see if that's the 1-4 matchup again. If that is how the cookie crumbles, we have a good idea of how that goes. Oregon, we've already seen in the opening week, which an Oregon fan too, if you're going to make the case to get over Tennessee as a 4 spot, even if you go 12-1, you went 12 straight or whatever. Following the Georgia game, that was a neutral cider. That was indoors. That was before Georgia had, really gotten used to these new players. Malachi Starks getting his first start, and a lot of new guys who had not started because Georgia lost so many dudes to the NFL. 15 players, 5 in the first round, and they still beat your brains in. And there's a lot of folks who have said that look, Georgia could have won by a lot more. Kirby took his foot off the gas in the second half because the rain and this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, I mean, the rain also affected Tennessee. Like that also affected what they were doing. And part of what Kirby was doing, that 9-minute drive, the Kirby, I think y'all call it the Kirby Death March in the second half, that was by design. Like they wanted to keep the ball and really just kill any hope of Tennessee coming back, because Tennessee gets the ball back to start off second half and do nothing with it. And you're like, oh, that's not good. That's not a good sign. And then they're like, yeah, this is what Kentucky wanted to do. This is what other programs who like Michigan would try and do this against Tennessee. A lot of those kind of schools, and this is not a negative. This is how you want to beat Tennessee when you have the players to do that. It's just run the ball at them, 7-yard chunk plays after 7-yard chunk plays, and then just score. I mean, Rosemary Jackson with that's it, right? Rosemary, what is it?
Rosemy Jack Saint.
Yeah, and you look it up, and he's like a top 60 player in his class. He just hasn't done anything. He's just been away, and he just pops up with the catch of the day that everyone's going to forget, I think, under the pylon. Where
that was a pro catch right there.
Right, that was a George Pickens catch. That was like one.
Sure. And he was coming along as a freshman, but he was the one when Georgia jumped up 14-0 on Florida in 2020, and he broke his ankle, just like not Tyrone Prothro stuff, but just like a gross ankle injury that he was out of football for like a year or so with that. So he's, like you said, big time recruit, and that's what Georgia felt like coming into the year. There was just a lot of like, yeah, he's a solid receiver. He's a solid receiver. He like a lot of solid guys. And A.D. Mitchell was kind of that. Like, there was no George Pickens, but A.D. Mitchell was kind of that one that was above all the rest. So yeah, there's a lot of good playmaking, and you finally saw McConkey really like. That's how McConkey looked last season. I think that's what Georgia fans were expecting. He looked like, making guys miss after the catch, hitting guys with the double move. He did that multiple times last year. It's just they got the production they needed, and you didn't even really see much of the tight ends really being used that much in this game.
And that was something interesting because if you had told me that Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington would be completely shut down in this one and Tennessee would still get basically blown out, I would have been surprised. I think a lot of even Georgia fans who were just dunking on Tennessee about this is big boy football, blah, blah, blah. I don't think any Georgia fan saw that kind of outcome in terms of like the defensive slugfest, limiting Tennessee to no touchdowns until the very end, no touchdown passes from Hooker. Not to make excuses, but there is part of this, and I'll get into where I came down is ultimately it didn't matter what else happened because of this element of the game, and Tennessee still has a long way to go here. I mean, Hooker missed some touchdowns. Like there was a couple plays where Hyatt beat his guy and like Hooker airmailed 2 touchdowns. Like that did happen. You go back to the tape, it's like Hooker's hit those throws so many times
Yeah,
before this year, and you just can't miss those against Georgia because your window of
because you're
opportunity is
exactly. Sorry, go
so
ahead.
slim because like Keely Ringo ran a better route than Cedric Tillman did on his interception. Like what are you doing with that? Where he there's nothing Cedric Tillman could have done there, and Cedric hasn't done anything like that in a month and a half. He's been hurt. He gets caught up with the ref in really awkward circumstances,
Yeah,
and I was like, I thought he was out of the game at that point because he's hobbling. The refs, and that's not the ref's fault, but ultimately bad luck there. Jalen Hyatt falls in a weird way. He's puking because he falls in a bad
well,
way.
Hyatt was the one that rolled his ankle on the ref.
Well, it was high. I guess it was high, but Tillman did something else. What did Tillman do? I've got him crossed now. Tillman got he re-aggravated his ankle somehow, and I forgot what. Maybe he got it on the sideline by somebody else. I don't know who it was, but he re-aggravated it, and you're like, oh god, is he back out? But you can't miss those. Like Hooker taking 6 sacks, and this was something that I had just jotted down was just so frustrating. And the difference between Stetson and Hendon, I think, came out a lot in this one, where I think they're wired completely different as quarterbacks. Where Stetson is, and this was always a telltale sign that you don't watch Georgia football games, is you call him a game manager. That's what Hendon Hooker is. Like Hendon Hooker is an elite game manager where he was taking sacks on Saturday because he was like, I'm not turning the ball over. I'm not throwing into stuff that isn't there and hoping for a prayer. Like Will Levis would have taken some chances in that game on Saturday and thrown some pick sixes. And a lot of quarterbacks probably would have done that. Hooker was like, I'll just take the sack and live to fight another day. And he kept hoping that he'd be able to fight another day and that the line would come through. And it just never came. Like a lot of those sacks were coverage sacks, but also just like he didn't have time, but he was also not going to make the dumb play. He is so adamant about not taking chances downfield if it's not there and not taking chances really, I mean, at all. Like he wasn't taking chances on the ground. He wasn't taking chances. He was just, he went into a shell that we haven't really seen before as the Tennessee starting quarterback. Stetson, when he faces something like that, he escapes the pocket and he wants to run. Stetson like dives into the end zone and scores a running touchdown. Stetson has no fear. He's going over the top. He's doing intermediate stuff. Even if he has what should have been a pick to open to Jeremy Banks right away, he's like unfazed. And he's like, I'm going to keep being aggressive. Like he's an aggressive player. And that was something that came true. And he outplayed Hendon in a lot of ways. But something you can't discount is the pressure. Like Byron Young was the worst graded pass rusher for Tennessee in this game. Tyler Barron had another just non-existent day on the edge. Joshua Joseph's true freshman didn't do anything. That's a big part of this is that Jalen Carter ate Javonte Spraggins alive on the interior. And J.J. Crawford, I think, gave up like 5 of those 6 sacks on the left tackle spot. And that was something that Tennessee thought they had solidified. JUCO transfer. He was not a high profile. It's not a 5-star kid at the left tackle spot, but he's been good to this point. But then you're like, oh, right. Tennessee's got a JUCO just kind of, this is going to be a problem against the teams like Georgia. The trenches is where this was lost to me. It's just that Tennessee does not have the bodies on the defensive line to pressure Stetson and to really make his life bad and to really stop those 7-yard running plays. They had nothing for them. Even when the game was on the line, that defensive line just does not have the bodies yet. They have reinforcements on the way, which Davian Bradley and company next year, and Joshua Josephs and Tyree West and guys like that are going to be got. But the difference between Tennessee and Georgia right now is Georgia's 7 years ahead of where Tennessee is right now. And that matters, where you have so many guys. If you lose Nolan Smith, if you lose Beal Jr., if you lose Jalen Carter, he has to sit out some plays. Like they just have guy after guy after guy. And you're like, wait, that dude's a 5-star. He just doesn't even play. Like he hasn't even been involved, or he's a 4-star and he's just waiting for his term. And Kirby even talked about that. Like no one entered the portal and he's like, they've all stuck it out and waiting for their opportunity and this, that, and the other. But it speaks to both sides of the ball where Georgia's offensive line manhandled Tennessee's defensive line, and Georgia's defensive line just completely annihilated J.J. Crawford and Javonte Spraggins. And we should say, Darnell Wright, I mean, he's probably going to be a first-rounder. He held his own at the right tackle spot. Nothing came on. Everything was Hendon's blind spot or straight up the middle with Jalen Carter. That was it. I don't know, but Tennessee
Javon
doesn't.
Bullard sacked him a couple times
Yeah,
on the corner blitz.
yes. There's just nothing. They had nothing there, and I think it doesn't matter how many times you play that game over and over again. I don't think the result would have been any different because part of the trump card that Kirby has over Heupel right now is he's like, you can do whatever you want to do. You can play tempo. You can do this and the other, but like we're gonna murder you in the trenches. Like you don't have the bodies. Like college football comes down to some Game of Thrones stuff, and Georgia is the Lannisters right now. They're Kirby's Tywin of just we have more money, we have more gold, we have more troops, and I'm smarter than you. And we're going. And I've been here before. Like I've been doing this for 7 years. And Heupel is kind of like the Rob Stark, where he's won every battle to this point. He's like, what are you supposed to do? I'm the young wolf. I've won everything in front of me. And then there's a Tywin Lannister just waiting it out. And he's like, just come to Athens. Just come here.
I don't know any
of
these references, but
a lot of listeners get
some
it, yeah.
people will know. But I think Kirby 100%. That was 100% recruiting there at the end of the game, where he's talking about, none of these guys hit the portal. These guys just love the University of Georgia, all that, because Georgia really does feel like such like the ultimate team. Like you look at the last 4 or 5 years, like been to 2 national championships now. They just number 1 pick in the draft. That wasn't first team or second team all SEC. It's like, it feels like so many teams that are having their special year. It's a star driven year. It's, they have a couple superstars and they're just having an amazing year this year. Where Georgia, it's like, I'm not sure who the best player is, but they're just a damn good team. It feels like they've been kind of that same type of team for several years now. Like Nakobe Dean last year, like that's the Bud Kiss Award winner. He's the one that wasn't a first round pick. Like you got 5 first round picks. Also throw in there. It's like it's kind of just crazy how like a no-name defense is what they called Georgia's defense back in like the 70s, 80s type thing, and it's that same type of deal. But you can't call them a no-name defense if you got 5 first rounders and more, which you got Jalen Carter, maybe Keely Ringo or something. It's just the way they've recruited, and I saw Steak Shapiro say it, who I normally don't get college football takes from. Steak Shapiro tweeted Saturday morning, like, did all of a sudden we forget? Did Georgia just not have way more 5 stars and 4 stars on all over the roster than Tennessee? Are we pretending this is going to play with Georgia? And obviously, I'm all right. I think Georgia's going to win. I'm not that confident now, Steak. But I mean, that's really what showed. It was just the talent difference. Like it's.
Well, I think that stemmed from the Kent State and Missouri showings, right? I think that's where that kind of belief came from. I think if Georgia curb stomps everyone to this point, that sentiment's not ringing true. I think part of it was just Georgia kind of sleepwalking through that first part of their schedule and sleepwalking a little bit for Kent State and Mizzou. I think that really changed a lot of people's, because I mean, Tennessee's got more talent, or a lot better than Kent State and Mizzou. I think that was a major part of it, was that Georgia had been kind of sleepwalking to this point in the calendar season. And I guess maybe part of it was the second half comeback by Florida and in Jacksonville maybe was another part of it. Like if Florida can put that on, what can Tennessee do, this and the other? And we should mention too, major part of this, Georgia's crowd absolutely rattled them. Like there were so many pre-snap penalties. Yeah. Like there were 2 or 3 on one drive
8.
alone.
I think they said 8 for the game pre-snap penalties.
That's insane. That's clearly just Tennessee was absolutely rattled with the crowd noise. And I forgot who it was. I think it was Graham Coffey, friend of the pod, who tweeted this, where he's like, yeah, like people who said that Tennessee would not be affected by crowd noise because of the way that, because they use their tempo and they just get this in really fast. They still look over to the sideline. And if they can't hear the checks in the sideline and they can't look over and get a good read of what they need to do next, then that's a problem. The crowd cannot be understated how much of an impact that was. Like Georgia fans really, really showed up and showed out. And hey, if you're going to spend that kind of money, that's absolutely what you should do. Because that was a tough ticket on Saturday afternoon.
Without a doubt,
you got to get your money's worth.
And it was a constant pissing contest too, like last week, of like, oh, but it's not as loud as Neyland. It's like, okay, well, the game's not being played at Neyland, so it's like that's great and everything. Maybe Neyland is louder, but it's this game. You just knew that Sanford Stadium was going to be absolutely electric. So yeah, it was all tag, and I back to the recruiting aspect, is like back, like specialist essentially. And I feel like the first, I don't know, several years that Kirby Smart was there, we seem to have a lot of overachievers kind of in the secondary. It was like maybe not the most elite talent, but we're getting like elite production out of them. But it feels like the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, Jordan at corner, at safety, like Malachi Starks, like this guy made so many open field tackles that like prevented big plays, like a one guy away from breaking a 15-20 yard run, and he yard gain. So Malachi Starks came to play in this one. But a couple stats to leave you with for this one. Tennessee 2 of 14 on third down in this game, and really one of those shouldn't even counted, because on that second scoring drive Tennessee had, that 3rd and 5, I want to say, around midfield, catch, that ball clearly hit the ground, but Tennessee runs so fast, goes so fast, they like got the other. So it was 2 of 14, and that one really shouldn't have counted, and that led to one of their, because you could see the defensive back's hand in the guy's hands, but that led to one of their drives in the first half. But the other one I'll lead you with, I'm going to call it Josh Heupel's Curb Tonight, is what I'm going to call it here. Kirby Smart, Josh Heupel, every single game as the Tennessee head coach that's not playing Georgia, Tennessee has scored 44.5 points per game. 2 games against the Bulldogs, averaging 15 points per game. And I've said it before on here, but like, you really won't convince me now seeing this Georgia play this Tennessee offense. And I know Alabama played them on the road and Georgia played them at home. You'll never convince me that Kirby Smart was not the brains behind Alabama's defense the whole time. Like, you really won't. Like, Nick Saban knows defense. He's a great CEO and just knows the organization. But it's just so obvious what Nick Saban's approach to defense is compared to Kirby Smart. The fact that 2 years ago, this guy's like, you can't stop these offenses. You just have to outscore them. We got to do what everyone else is doing and outscore them. And Kirby Smart's saying, no. We can stop these offenses. You just have to know what you're doing. You have to be able to get the players to do it. And Georgia's got an elite defensive staff. Just seeing what Georgia's defense is now compared from the last 4 years, like, Kirby's been the guy behind it the whole time. Like, Georgia just recruits elite defensive players, coach develops at an elite level, just schemes at an elite level. Like, this defense is just absurd. Like, if Tennessee can't score on them, like kind of referencing Ohio State earlier, like, Michigan obviously still has Ohio State, but looking at Georgia right now, like, Ohio State's the only team that I can really, Michigan or Ohio State are really the only teams out there that I feel like we don't know Georgia's better than right now. Like,
no, we know Georgia's better than Michigan. We've seen this story before. I think you can make the case Michigan was more dominant last year. I think.
I think Michigan's a better team this year, because I think McCarthy just gives them another element. They haven't had a tough schedule, but that's the only guy. That's the only teams you don't know for a fact. It feels like you know for a fact they're better than everyone in the SEC. Like, Alabama's really, with a second loss, is just kind of out of the conversation now. Like, with what they just did to Tennessee, like the Oregon blowout. Like, that's why I'm going to be interested in the Oregon Tennessee comparisons here in the next few weeks, because Tennessee, I think people said, because the chaos yesterday with Clemson losing, Alabama losing, that their probability to make the playoff actually went up yesterday.
Yes, it's gone up. So it's at like 63% or something, but it's the third highest of anyone in the fold to this point. It still requires probably a TCU loss along the way, but as long as undefeated
TCU definitely gets in over a one-loss Tennessee. But then I think Oregon and Tennessee, I think that's going to be a legitimate conversation. If, like, depending on how the season folds out, like, obviously the scoreline was a lot worse, Oregon and the Oregon-Georgia game versus the Tennessee-Georgia game, but I feel like the domination seemed just as equal. You know what I mean? It was like
points matter, though, and that was more the points matter neutral site versus an away atmosphere, and I think the committee is going to look at that of just like
how neutral was Mercedes-Benz though?
It was pretty neutral still, and you're in a dome.
It's probably 75% Georgia fans, I would say.
That's
like,
fine, but it's
at
still not the
least.
same. Like, it was not a hostile
Yeah.
atmosphere. It was not a hostile atmosphere for Oregon. We were not talking about after the pod. We weren't like, man, that felt like a Georgia home game.
That's
That was
fair.
just
Wasn't breaking 130 decibels or
That's what
whatever
I'm saying.
that.
Like, I think the committee is going to factor that in, and the fact that the committee put Tennessee at number 1 to start off the CFP, they obviously have a lot of respect for them. The schedule matters, and they talked about that in the ESPN piece of like the committee has talked about that Michigan's schedule being terrible is factored into what's going to happen. So I think because of their schedule, whoever loses Ohio State, Michigan's out. I don't think they're going to put 2 Big Ten teams in. I don't think
the X factor though is kind of like when Alabama loses, like if Ohio State loses to Michigan, that's when it changes. Like if Ohio State beats Michigan, you're like, oh yeah, Michigan, you're out. But if Michigan beats Ohio State, it's like there's still this bias that's like, Ohio State's loaded though. They are still really good. Like I wonder how that would change the conversation. But depending on how things go moving forward, like Tennessee was really hanging their hat on the Alabama win. Okay, now Alabama's lost to LSU. The blowout in Death Valley is still a huge win also. Like those are the 2 wins that had them as the clear best resume up until now. I think you'd have to say Georgia has the best resume with two blowouts of what will be the 5th and 6th ranked teams probably in the playoff rankings. So Georgia probably has the best resume now. If Alabama is to lose maybe to Ole Miss or something, I know that sounds crazy, but like if they become the 15th, 20th ranked team in the country, that sounds ridiculous. Like that win no longer carries that much weight, especially by 3 points at home. You still have the win over LSU. Like I think LSU should be able to take care of Arkansas and Texas A&M. But if LSU is to drop one of these games, the Tennessee's resume might not be as it could like just be dwindling as the weeks go on. Whereas Oregon, like these Pac-12, how many Pac-12 teams we got in the top 12 right now? Like 3 or 4?
But they're going to start cannibalizing each other. Like they still, USC and UCLA still have to play. Oregon still has to play Utah, and they play Washington this week. They're going to start cannibalizing each other. I'm not worried about the Pac-12.
That's where it's big is because if they beat Oregon, or if Oregon beats Utah, that's a big time win right there. And then regardless of who it is, I think it'd be better if it's USC just because of the brand bias with USC, and they've already played UCLA. But if USC can run the table from here on out, and Oregon runs the table from here on out, like that's going to be like at lowest like number 5 versus number 6 for the Pac-12 championship. And if Oregon beats number 6 the week and gets that conference championship title next to their name, I'm only talking about Oregon. If USC is in the same situation, like, and they didn't get blown out by Georgia, they lose to Oregon State. Was that
who?
USC's got 1 loss right now, right?
It was to Utah. Utah.
Oh, in the 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
1 loss is just by a 2-point conversion at the very end. Both those teams, like the Pac-12's got a lot of solid teams right there at the top that like if you run through that schedule, USC's also got Notre Dame, which is turning into a more respectable opponent as well. So I don't know. I'm starting to think that Pac-12, if the Pac-12 champion can escape with 1 loss, I'm starting to think they can get into the playoff.
Maybe. I have my doubts. I mean, even if they do, like, I still think Tennessee can just sit there. And as long as they take care of business, and they're favored by 20 against Mizzou this weekend, and I think they'll probably steamroll the next 3. And the committee factors in what the team, like, they add it. It seems like context matters because strength of schedule, Tennessee obviously has the best strength of schedule of anyone in the, like, top 6, 7, whatever. And you can look at like Pitt down the stretch or Florida down the stretch, but like they factor in what was the circumstance going into that week? Where were they ranked? How big of a game was it that particular week? And like you said, it's like even if Alabama goes down, LSU's rising right now, and Tennessee went into Death Valley and blew them out. So that's going to factor in. The committee clearly has strong respect for Tennessee and does not have strong respect for the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and Michigan. I think to this point too, with the schedule, I think Michigan's going to have to run the table to get in. I don't think they're going to get an at-large. I don't think they're going to do 2 Big Tens. But you know what's funny? The doomsday for all,
I think those schedules are too weak.
Yeah, but it would be hilarious because I think you could actually make a really compelling argument that this is the case. that the 4 best teams in college football are the best CFP possible is to do 2 Big Ten, 2 SEC. But you can't do it. You can't do it. The committee cannot leave the ACC, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 out. But like, if you do one Georgia, 4 Michigan, and then 2 Ohio State, 3 Tennessee, would that not maybe be the best games? Or Tennessee, Michigan at 2-3, and then Ohio State, Georgia in the first round? Would those not be the most competitive?
I feel like Michigan's got a 2-game season this year, and if they lose one of them, I can't put them in the college football playoff.
But wouldn't you say that they're still probably one of the 4 best?
I mean, I think it's possible. Right now, I would say they're the 3rd best.
Like, if you had a gun to your head right now, Matt Green, who do you think are the 4 best teams on any neutral site that, like, just the 4 best in college football right now, 1 through 4? Who would you say is the best 4? Don't worry about just getting a Pac-12 team in here, or a Big 12 team, whatever. Who in your heart of hearts do you feel are the 4 best teams in college football right now?
I don't like how you're phrasing this question, because TCU should be number 4 right now.
Not what we're doing. Do you think that they are? Yeah.
Tennessee is the 4th best team in the country, I think. I mean, honestly, I don't know that. I don't know that Tennessee's not better than Michigan. I don't know that Tennessee's not better than Ohio State, honestly, with how they've looked. But that's how I would rank them: was Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Tennessee. But
you see, we're on the same page. We think that the 4 best teams are 2 in the Big Ten and 2 in the SEC, and that's something else that's coming out of this. Where Georgia fans, look, I don't want Georgia fans coming at me, but can we not acknowledge that this is also insane that Tennessee's here 19, 20 months after Heupel took over, and the roster that they have, that this was even just the game of the century and build that way? Yeah, you're ahead of us. And look, Tennessee fans were pretty choppy, and they were like, we're coming for the East, and look, enjoy it, all that good stuff. But it's also true that Georgia losing that game would have been a problem. That would have been like, oh, this is insanity. Like Tennessee, because remember, what did I say before the season? I said Tennessee would split Alabama, Georgia. I said it before the year. I'm like, I don't know which way it's going to go, but they're splitting those 2. They're beating one of the 2. They beat Alabama. They lost to Georgia. 11-1, which is what it looks like. And just even if you don't make the playoffs, and let's also say what's unfortunate is that something that we have not adjusted, I think older fans haven't adjusted to, is that the other bowls don't matter. So when they're like, oh, a New Year's 6, like Tennessee's probably looking at a Sugar Bowl appearance. It's like, okay, Darnell Wright's not playing in that game. Cedric Tillman's not playing in that game. Hendon Hooker is not playing in that game. I can go up and down the list.
A lot of quarterbacks seem to play, though.
Hendon Hooker will not play in that football game.
Trask played in the Sugar Bowl. Like, I don't know. It's something about quarterbacks. They seem to play more than like the skill position, like McCaffrey or someone not playing. Like,
I don't know. I don't know. Like, that's not a big deal to me, because I'm like, yeah, bowls back then. Yeah, I agree with you. Sugar Bowl, where it's like everyone's going to be in and it's a big atmosphere. But I'm like, I think there's going to be a bunch of people who don't play. It's probably going to be Joe Milton under center. I have no interest in that.
But speaking of the doomsday scenario, is still in hand.
Which is what?
It was 3 SEC teams. It's still possible, because I think everyone thinks TCU is going to lose, right?
Yes. I think they're losing this weekend. I don't think they're beating Texas.
Yeah, Texas is I think a 7-point favorite at this point. Yeah. So if TCU loses and you have a 1-loss Big 12 champion, it's going to be hard to be this is what has to happen. LSU runs the table and beats Georgia in the SEC championship. If that happens, LSU is getting in the playoff as a 2-loss SEC champion. Georgia will be ranked ahead of Tennessee. Wherever you decide they are, Georgia will be 1 spot ahead of Tennessee. That Big Ten champion will be in. If the Pac-12 champion doesn't get out with 1 loss, like if that's a 2-loss conference champion and TCU has 1 loss, that can happen. The thing that I don't think is least likely to happen is LSU running the table and beating Georgia. I think it's possible. They just beat Alabama, but I don't see LSU beating Georgia to this point. So in that scenario, like, who makes the playoff? If we got a 2-loss Pac-12 champion, TCU with 1 loss, you're talking Georgia is the 1 seed. Big Ten champion.
I can tell you what they're going to do. They're going to do the Big
2
Ten
seed.
They're what I'm saying. You're getting Michigan and Ohio State. You're getting both.
I think that's true. That is the scenario to get SEC versus Big Ten, because honestly, that with how it transpired in this season, if we got Georgia versus Michigan first round, Ohio State versus Tennessee first round, That would be a satisfying playoff. Like, I don't know. Right now, TCU is the 4 because they're undefeated, and if they get in, they should, or if they go undefeated, 100% they're in.
It's the Cincinnati
But
thing where it's like you have to do it because they went undefeated and they've looked great, and you're like, I can't.
but they're way better. They're way better resume than Cincinnati.
I don't think so. I think Cincinnati last year is a better team than TCU this year. That Cincinnati team had NFL players all over the place. Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant.
They did have a lot
of
NFL players, but in terms of resume, like I just respect that Big 12 schedule more than the AAC plus. I mean, they did play Notre Dame at a con. Like that was the win.
They played Georgia decent.
No,
2 years
the
ago.
year before.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like they played Georgia decent. We've seen it. So what I'm saying is like if you got that last year,
that's not on their 2021 resume, is it? What they did in the previous year.
What I'm saying is ultimately, like, if you throw that 2020 Cincinnati, because I mean, they played Georgia decent in that bowl game. Like, they were in it, and obviously a lot of sit outs and stuff like that for Georgia. But, like, if you put Cincinnati against Georgia this year, that Cincinnati team, or even last year's team, I think they hold they're built in a way, and Luke Fickell's a good enough coach where I don't know. I think I would
be more similar to what the Bama game was.
Better. Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a blowout, but they handled them, basically. Yeah.
Kind of what happened with Tennessee, where it was just like the score did not really indicate how the game actually went.
What do you mean by that? Because I think that was a huge blowout.
No, what I'm saying is I think Alabama was never nervous about losing to Cincinnati at any point in that game. I think they were never like, oh, we really got to. Georgia was never once nervous on Saturday about losing that game.
I feel like Cincinnati, Alabama was a way closer game. Like that was actually into the third quarter, where it was like.
But do you think Nick Saban was sweating?
Wasn't getting blown out? Like just the fact that Georgia just jumped out so quick, like it fell over. It fell over by halftime, pretty much. Like and Georgia just kind of took the air out of the ball. Expression is, but yeah, it was a fun night at the Green household, that's for sure. I was got a lot of text messages about the podcast that it's like you have fun talking to Chase Thomas on the podcast tomorrow. A lot of people were texting me. So
people were on Twitter like, come get your man Matt Green to me, and like there was a lot of Twitter stuff directed at me after this game. But I feel like I've been nothing. I feel like I've been classy about this whole thing.
I was going to say the exact same thing. As my brother was even talking, he made a comment that he thought you were going to be way more, brash on the preview episode for this game. But I didn't think you were. I was like, in terms of talking trash when on this podcast, I was like, he was classy and lead up to this game. He was classy post game. You hit me with the congrats text. So no, I wasn't going to rub it in.
No, and look, the only thing I rub it in is like the everything school. That's the only thing I like to just be a little over the top with, because look, man, it's a fun time, and it's a fun thing.
Like being good at every sport, that's cool. We're trying to win championships over
I know.
Here. That's if you just want to be top 10 every sport, have a good time, win more games than you lose. Like that's cool. You guys just having a good time.
That's what I'm saying. Cool. We're having the vibe is always good, because you're always good. You're gonna see more wins and losses throughout the calendar year. It's a fun time.
I will say this weekend, it's hard to say when Alabama's losing. Everyone roots against Alabama. This weekend, the Georgia Bulldogs were America's team.
Oh wow!
I think the Georgia Bulldogs were protecting the nation from the Tennessee fan base.
But what's funny about that? Did you see all the Georgia fans on Twitter like immediately when they realized that Tennessee is now backdooring their way into you thought they were getting sent away, that Tennessee fans were getting pushed away, and then Jason Kirk, I think, quote tweeted where he's like, when you realize Alabama losing ends Tennessee's playoff berth, but only to realize LSU winning ensures that Tennessee is backdooring their way into the college football final is hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have a solid shot to backdoor into it. And I mean, it's like, but I don't even know why a Georgia fan would be that mad. Like, no disrespect to Tennessee, but after what you just saw yesterday, like,
well, it's not about that. It's just like, oh, we beat you and you still get a way in. Like, you're gonna get a bye, because you're basically getting a bye. If Tennessee gets in, they get to skip the SEC title game and really save a lot of tread on the tires. For solid a month off?
That's technically true, but it's not a bye since they actually did play Bama and LSU this year and beat them both. So it's like it's legit if they beat the two best teams in the West, basically. So I also want to defend the overrated chant.
You can't do
People
it.
are
You can't.
people
You
are
can't
hating.
defend it. No,
People are hating
this
on
is
the
one you can't
overrated
defend, Matt
chant
Green. I put my foot in the ground for this one. You can't defend it. When you are the
because
king, it's like one of those rules where it's like if someone
no.
has to tell you that you're the king or you're the president, then that doesn't, or you're the leader, or if you have to tell other people that you're the leader, then you're not really the leader.
No,
It's
so this
just
is my thing. So
yeah.
in general, I saw Barrett Sallee tweet this, and in
Mm-hmm.
general, I agree with the overrated chant. It doesn't always make sense because we're unranked Kansas State over here. You're number 2 Oklahoma. We just beat you. We're chanting overrated, so that means you weren't actually that good. So that's why
Mm.
we beat you. But so it's like you're kind of downplaying your own victory in that sense.
Yes.
But when the team is number 1 and you're like, no, fuck that, we're number 1, then the overrated makes sense because like, no, you guys are overrated because you are not the number 1 team in the country. We, in fact, are the number 1 team in the country. So I will defend the overrated chant in this scenario. But
Okay.
yeah,
Rick
it
Barnes
was
shouted at the Tennessee fans when they were chanting overrated one game last year. Like he was shouting, like knock it off. He's like, that's so stupid. Like you could hear him on the mic saying that's so stupid. He was so mad, and I forgot it may have been Auburn. I'm trying to remember who it was, but he was chanting. They were chanting overrated at somebody. He was losing it. Like coaches hate it. Like coaches, you talk about rat poison. Chanting overrated at a team is a good way of getting them more motivated
hey, if
to come
it's
through.
some like some let's play football type stuff, like there's no problem. If you're saying overrated when the game's starting, yeah, the head coach probably, hey guys, let's settle down. Let's play
Yeah.
the game first. But fourth quarter, celebrating the win, I'm all for it.
Rumors of Alabama's demise, I think, are a little nuts, Matt Green. I'm now seeing immediately after this game the reaction theater of like the Alabama dynasty has ended, folks. Did you hear about this, Matt Green? The Alabama run for Nick Saban is over. He's lost 2 games. He's not going to make the college football playoff this year. They lose on a 2-point conversion try in overtime to LSU. Brian Kelly, who's been bold all season long, didn't pay off in the Tennessee game. Was going for it on fourth a lot, doing the really aggressive stuff, and he messed around and got blown out. But Jaden Daniels has been incredible the last few weeks. He's really blossomed into a big-time player for the Tigers and has just been phenomenal for them as they now look like they're in the driver's seat to win the SEC West. But look, Alabama still is the number 1 recruiting class for 2023 per 247. They just got the top kid in the 2024 class at quarterback. Bryce Young is still awesome, and he deserves all the credit in the world. There was a good tweet by Clint Lamb of Bama Insider, who and this was my thought too when I'm watching this, like they gave Bryce Young the ball back, LSU did late, and I was like, oh, here's Bryce's time. He's going to drive down, do his thing, and score. Because Bryce Young, you just can't kill him, man. The dude he is the calmest, most cerebral quarterback I think in the league right now. And I Stetson's right up there with him. Hendon doesn't really have this. Bryce is just different in terms of how much of a pain and how much no quit attitude this kid has. And it's unbelievable. Like Bryce Young was meant to play quarterback, and he has to have it when you're that size. Like you have to have otherworldly talents to make up for that, and he does. But anyway, the tweet was just like the Ted movie moment where he's like, "My time, assholes," where Ted like gets off the bench and he's like, "This is my time, assholes," and he's like running up to the bench to testify. That's like Bryce Young, whatever. He's like, "All right, my time," like, and he hops on the field and just is like, "All right, I'm gonna go drive on the field." I thought it was over, and then LSU drives down and they obviously go for it on, for 2 in overtime when they didn't have to yet. This was not deep into overtime where it's 2 over you have to go for 2 at every point now. Which reminds me, we really haven't had any crazy 7 overtime games where it's like, oh, these overtime rules are insanely stupid and this is not a great way of deciding who wins this football game. We really haven't had that this year. It
We've had
seems
a
like
Oh yeah, we had a couple last year.
yeah, we had a couple last year. We were like, oh, these are terrible, and it just has not happened. Knock on wood. But look, man, I am not there with Alabama to just write them off. What I think is going to happen, though, and I don't know if I texted you this or it was in my family group chat, but I was like, what's going to happen is actually a little more scary. Saban has signed on to 2030. He's not going anywhere. But if you're an assistant, I hope you're renting because I think that's where changes are happening. Is Bill O'Brien, he's gone. I think Pete Golding might be gone. It's big game hunting season on replenishing this staff and figuring it out, because you look at this game plan. Jahmyr Gibbs was averaging 6.6 yards per carry, and he had 15 carries in this game. The wide receivers, they have talent everywhere. Like, they have not done anything with it. Like Ja'Cory Brooks, whoever, Holden, Burton, none of these guys are doing anything in this offense. Bryce Young's having to do everything, and he's like just running for his life and trying to find Jahmyr Gibbs on out patterns. And Cameron Letu is his favorite target. It's not good. It's a problem when Cameron Letu is his favorite target, and he's just not an explosive guy. So Alabama's offense was extremely limited again against LSU. And look, still a lot of talent, a bunch of talent coming in next year. I am not even close to writing the Saban's lost the dynasty. What's happened is Georgia has just become a better version of what Saban is. Like, they are now the best program in college football. Georgia is number one. Here's the thing. Alabama is just number two. Alabama is still right there. I am not ready to do this. And this is a mistake by folks to write off Nick Saban in Alabama at this point, because when you see a program fall, like Jimbo is a program in decline where it's like, oh, this is going off the deep end. There is when the recruiting falls off a cliff at Alabama, then we'll start talking. Like, when they start going 6-6, 7-5 for a 3-year span or something, we'll talk. Alabama's probably still going to win 9 games this year. Like, maybe 10. Like, they're fine. Just a down year. And I get the whole comments about like it was a reloading year last year, and that irked a lot of Georgia fans that they were in a reloading year and that they were the preseason favorite to win the national title. I get all of that, but that's the point. They were the preseason favorites this year. That is not a sign of a team and a dynasty that's in decline. None of this is in decline. I don't get it.
Whoa. So hold on. I gotta disagree with you big time here. So
Okay.
I was gonna start by saying, yes, this dynasty is 100% over. Like, it is clearly over because of if we're truly talking the dynasty, if we're talking Alabama's window to continue to compete for national championships, no, that's not over.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, they're still
the dynasty is clearly over because they were just so head and shoulders number one, like every single year. And yeah, you might beat them, but you're still not better than them. Like, Deshaun Watson beat them with just a ridiculous individual performance. And obviously Clemson had a lot of help. It was a shootout. But they weren't better than that Alabama team. They just happened to beat them that day. It was like, just every time you beat Alabama, it's like the stars and the heavens had to align for you to beat Alabama. Like, they're just not that level of elite. And they don't look particularly well coached this season. Like, they look very undisciplined. They just do very uncharacteristic Alabama things. So I feel like it's not even, I don't even think it's up for debate that it's on the decline. Like, it's clearly not what it once was.
They have the number one class next year. They just got the number one quarterback. Like, I think it's just a coordinator thing. I think it's kind of like a better version of what's happened to Clemson, where they promoted from within. Just not very inspiring coordinators. They've been picked off a bunch, kind of like what's happened to the Patriots, where just so many assistants have been picked off over the last few years. Sarkisian, Kiffin, Mel Tucker, Pruitt, whoever. Like, it would not surprise me at all. Like, I don't know what his show clause situation is, but are we sure Jimmy Pruitt's not the DC at Alabama next year? I don't know what his show clause is, but they're gonna go big game hunting, and they're gonna replenish the staff. And I look at it as just that, like, you cannot, maybe in the sense that like Alabama winning as many national titles, where the preposterous stat of like every recruiting class at Alabama's won a national title. Maybe that goes away. Maybe something like that is not as common, but give me a full recruiting cycle. Give me a 4-year window where Alabama doesn't win a national title before I'm ready to go, all right, we're in a different era of college football, and Saban's stranglehold on the sport is not what it once was. I'm just not there.
I mean, right now, what are we? So we got 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. That's a 5-year span right there. They have one national championship.
Okay.
Like, even that is like, because they're not, I think we can safely say they're not winning the national championship this year, right?
No, that's over. Yeah. They're not.
So like one national championship in a 5-year span, like, that's already just so uncharacteristic. So I feel like now they're a normal, great program. Like, Ohio State is, great every year, but they might not be a national championship, like true, like national championship winner every year, but they're a contender basically every year. So I think Alabama is just kind of regressing back to the field. And so like they're still capable of winning a national championship. I'm not saying Saban's never going to win another championship, but I think their run as this dynasty, I think that is clearly over. Like you look at since 2021, 14 SEC games they've played since the start of 2021. 10 of those games were a one-score game in the fourth quarter. Like that's teams just don't play like that with Alabama. And even this year against Power 5 competition, their average margin of victory, basically, the average points scored and points allowed, 33.8 to 25.8. That's their average score in a Power 5 game this year. Like Bama's beating in 6 games. Actually, I left out Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt doesn't count as a Power 5. They're an outlier. They throw off data. So I just don't include Vanderbilt. So basically winning games by a touchdown in 6 Power 5 games, which includes, I think, five games and Texas, 5 conference games and Texas. So yeah, it's just not the typical just Bama standard that we're used to. The fact that we're actually talking about like they go to Ole Miss, like they just lost last week. We're not, oh man, they're going to get pissed and absolutely murder somebody this week. We're like, well, they just lost to LSU. Yeah, they could lose in Oxford next week too, because that's a tough offense. That could be a tough matchup for them.
We'll see. We'll see. We'll get to our pick'em this week with a lot of folks jumping on the Lane train and a week off for the Ole Miss Rebels.
The one last thing I'll say about Bama as far as pertains to the playoff, I'm afraid, and I kind of said this a few months ago, I think the 12-team playoff will ultimately be fun. March Madness is fun. Seeing all these matchups we don't ever see will be fun. But the sport just overreacted to this Alabama dynasty. And it was like, oh, well, it's the same thing every year. It's like under any sort of format that you could possibly have, this Alabama team would have dominated it for the last decade. So I'm afraid, like looking at what we're looking with the top 4 right now, that we're like, oh, do we have like 4 like legit contenders? We have like 6. Like just looking at it, and it's new teams, new brands. It's not Clemson, it's not Alabama, it's not Oklahoma. Like those 3 teams probably have like a third of the playoff appearances right there. The fact that we're seeing new teams, I think it's showing that the 14 playoff was fine. And I'm afraid that the 12-team playoff was kind of a reaction to just this golden era, like this unheard of, unprecedented dynasty that this sport had.
Possibly. We'll see. I mean, if you look at it, Georgia's dynasty is coming. And I think that's a big part of this too, is that I think Georgia's on pace to go back-to-back. And if Georgia has taken that throne, then Alabama has to be the biggest loser in that shift as a whole. But we shall see. We shall see, Matt Green. Next up, Notre Dame. They run all over Clemson, blow them out. Clemson makes another third quarter quarterback change. Cade Klubnik throws one pass, doesn't go well. DJU struggles again in this one. The offensive line was not good whatsoever for Clemson. But Clemson, kind of like Ohio State, kind of like what you said with Alabama, they're just hanging around. They just are finding themselves in these dogfights week over week. Syracuse had the last possession driving, couldn't quite close the deal there, but they gave Clemson a really good fight on the road. It was due. Eventually, Clemson was going to drop one of these regular season games, but it just came to a team that has lost to both Stanford and Marshall at home this season, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And Drew Pine, let's see, he threw 9 of 17 for 85 yards, 1 TD, no picks. It's weird. Big win for Notre Dame, big win for Marcus Freeman and his program. But let's not overstate this, where it's like the Notre Dame stuff, like Notre Dame's back. It's like this offense still stinks. They ran over 2 running backs going for over 100 yards. This Clemson team, the secret's been out all year long. They're not a great team. They're a solid team. You can make the case that North Carolina is better than Clemson this year. Because at least with Drake May and company, that offense is humming. And I wouldn't be surprised if North Carolina wins the ACC this year.
Drake May is the number 1 pick of the 2024 NFL draft. That he's a baller.
Yeah, and true freshman, great player. Going to be fun to watch for years.
2025 then.
I think he'd be 2025.
My year might be off.
No, yes, because it's like it doesn't matter. But by and large, it's it is what it is. Jeff Scott just got fired, so you can bring him back this offseason. Who knows what Chad Morris is doing? Brent Venables might be on the way out in Oklahoma. Just get the whole gang back together. Let's replenish the staff. But it turns out just promoting from within all across the board, it's not a great strategy. And Clemson just, there's something off. Not enough where like the program's imploding or anything like that, but like you talk about Saban making big changes this offseason. I think Clemson's going to have to look itself in the mirror and make some big changes too. And Dabo's going to make some tough coaching changes, tough just philosophical changes with the portal and stuff like that. That, look, man, this was bound to happen, but I'm glad it did because we did not need to have this Clemson team in the playoff. I think this eliminates them from the playoff. I don't think they have the resume to, even as a one-loss team, to get in. I think this is it. I think Clemson's out, and that's a problem for the ACC. What did you make of it?
That's fair. I guess I might have to change my opinion. Notre Dame may have been America's team this week because I was dreading Clemson being in the playoff. I felt like they were going to just run the table against this schedule, and they just do not seem like an elite team this year. But yeah, the only difference I think with them and in terms of comparing to Ohio State and Alabama, when Ohio State and Alabama are like underperforming, you're like, I know they're better than this. Like, why are they not playing like they're capable of? At this point, Clemson, it's like, this is who they are. They're just not capable of maybe not being down 35-0 to Notre Dame. But this offense has just been frustrating for a year and a half now, like almost 2 years now. Like it's not really getting much better. Like they were starting, like once you saw Shipley is started to come on and like, that's made the offense a little more dynamic. Exactly. Like he was shut down. And the Clemson defense has not been nearly as dominant as we kind of thought coming into this season, but I feel like it was still a strength of the team. But to get absolutely shredded for over 250 yards on the ground, like, and then all the crazy intangible plays that just kind of turn this into a blowout, pick six, take back 90 yards, block punt, you take back for a touchdown. Like, they just had all the makings of what you need for an upset. And yeah, it seemed like Clemson was playing with fire. Like you come out kind of don't look impressive enough times, like somebody's going to get you. And it was the Irish and Notre Dame. This has to make Notre Dame reevaluate their conference affiliation. Does it not?
No.
They're semi in the ACC here. Right now, they've got wins over Clemson, Syracuse, and North Carolina. You guys could dominate this conference. Go just make it official, all sports. Go join the ACC. They're the best team in the ACC this year. Just like North Carolina's getting a Sun Belt conference title this year, Notre Dame might get that ACC title.
BYU last year in the Pac-12.
Getting that Pac-12 South title.
Champs. Yeah. But we'll see what ultimately happens. But I will say, I think people are now overreacting a little bit to the Brian Kelly. I think Josh Pate, friend of the show, Late Kick, he said, and on his show on Sunday night or Sunday evening, whenever you're hearing this, but I think he said it was the rare win-win. Marcus Freeman getting promoted at Notre Dame and what Brian Kelly's doing at LSU. That's TBD. Because Brian Kelly won a lot of games at Notre Dame, and Brian Kelly, I think he made this jump where he's like, I want Saban with LSU players. I want Saban in the SEC. Like, not a win-win because Brian Kelly got this team to multiple playoffs. Brian Kelly has now shown, without a shadow of a doubt, this man can coach at Cincinnati. He can coach at Notre Dame. He can coach at LSU. The dude's just a winner. He wins wherever he goes. And now he has the best players he's ever had. And Notre Dame's recruiting well right out of the gate here. But let's see. Drew Pine's complete 9 passes a week. Let's wait and pump our brakes on the Notre Dame is just they're fine. Like, still haven't figured out the quarterback situation since Brady Quinn. Let's calm it down.
To be fair, I did listen to Josh Pate tonight, and I think he was referencing something he said back in June. So I think that's what he said back in June. And now I guess you're starting to get good vibes about Marcus Freeman because back in June, obviously they were recruiting really well and everything. But I think the jury's definitely still out on Marcus Freeman. I mean, this is first year ever as a head coach. But this is exactly what we talked about Brian Kelly. You know, the first thing Brian Kelly said when he got, I don't know, maybe into his coach's office, just as soon as he could be private with anybody, he said, that's exactly why I came to LSU to beat Alabama because I couldn't beat them at Notre Dame. I couldn't get the players that I could beat them at Notre Dame. LSU, he's not even got his players yet, but just the prerequisite players that LSU has are just better than what Notre Dame has. There's just so much talent year in, year out on this LSU roster. I think we can all agree Ed Orgeron, like, he wasn't even really a good coach. You know what I mean? I'm honestly not convinced Les Miles was ever a good coach. They did some of the most bonehead game management plays ever and kind of won despite some of the coaches' decisions at some point. Those guys won national championships. Brian Kelly is actually a proven, really good head coach. Like, LSU could absolutely be building a powerhouse. The fact that they're this good year one,
that's another problem for Saban.
Kelly,
like, if Brian Kelly takes control of the West too, and Jordan's already taking control of the East, like, that's another problem.
Yeah, the whole culture fit and everything. Sam Pittman's great up there. The culture is, how's it going in 2022? It's the culture. Yeah, he's really nice guy, but things aren't great right now. I think the accent that Brian Kelly's got, I think they're liking it down in Baton Rouge right about now.
Let's talk about Arkansas, who lost at home to Liberty. Just a brutal loss for the Razorbacks, who've had just a really rough year for Sam Pittman. It was 21-3 Liberty at the half. All this stuff was through the air. Liberty could not run on Arkansas, but this was even more cruel where, like, Liberty had a goal line stand to end this as Arkansas had a last little bit of shot here to win late and could not do it. Sam Pittman said, "This is never what you want to hear with your program." Quote, "We've lost games since I've been here, but not like this. These games we've won since I've been head coach here. I know I might get tested on that, why I said that, but we hadn't gotten beat like this. That's my responsibility. This is something that happens in year one of a rebuild. You lose the Liberty or a good group of 5 at home or something like that. Where you're at now, where you were like, oh, is Arkansas the new, like, dark horse long-term challenger? Pittman recruits well, like, a lot of good vibes, good coordinator hires with Bryles and Odom, and, you know, close to Texas, proximity is there, you know, Jerry Jones money, they got some boosters. Like, Arkansas might just be a sleeping giant and waiting over there. Then you lose to Liberty at home, and you're like, life comes at you fast, man. There's no way to spin this. This is an absolute embarrassment, and this is also the exact kind of game, if you're Hugh Freeze and you want a SEC job, this is the exact kind of game you had to have. And, man, I don't know if this increases the odds that Auburn goes harder after him, but, man, hats off to Hugh Freeze. I mean, just an embarrassment of a loss for Arkansas at home, and just another huge notch for Hugh Freeze. That guy can just flat out coach, and he's significantly better than Sam Pittman.
Huge notch for Hugh Freeze. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like you said, like, you mess around and play the best of the rest from the group of 5. Like, one of them's going to get you. They had a close one over Cincinnati. What was honestly kind of a close game at BYU, and then Liberty actually got them, stopped them on the 2-point conversion there at the end. Like you said, like the A&M loss early on, it was like A&M's not a good team, but it was like, it was one of those fluky games. Like, yeah, you turned it over. They had that like 90-yard, maybe 95-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown. It was like a game you kind of dominated on the stat sheet, but you didn't dominate on the score line. Lose to Alabama, like in a game where you gave a good fight, but like they pulled away. And then once they lost to Mississippi State, that third straight, you're like, okay, is Arkansas actually a good team? Are we sure they're a good team? And then I feel like they were kind of like the offense has been there, but the defense has just been scored on by everybody. And they were kind of at least going in the right track. I mean, if they're 6-3 coming out of this game, they're still on track to potentially win 8. I mean, they're probably not going to win 9 games with what they have left, but now sitting here at 5-4, you're talking about you might not make a bowl game. Like, I think they're going to beat Missouri at Missouri. That's not a guarantee. And like, you got to win one of these next 3. And you have LSU, Ole Miss, and Missouri. Like, I thought this was the second best team in the SEC West coming into the year. And I even thought it after probably the first 3 or 4 weeks. But now, I mean, can they finish? I don't know what the standings are right now. Can they finish in last in the West? Or is A&M kind of got that on? Or maybe A&M and Auburn might have
A&M and Auburn, I think, have that on lock.
But yeah, I mean, it's also on a separate story, a separate side note, is the SEC down this year?
Ooh.
I was just looking at a lot of teams. Like it doesn't feel down when a new team rises, like someone like Tennessee that feels like kind of a new kid in the table. So, but you have Georgia and Tennessee right here at the top. We are all kind of wondering about how good Alabama is. LSU, they're good but flawed. After LSU, like who's the next best team in the or I guess Alabama you'd have to say is the fourth best team right now. After Alabama, like who's the next best team in the conference?
Ole Miss.
Okay, that you're right. Ole Miss. After Ole Miss, who's the next best team in the conference? I feel like there's just a lot of jumble to get. Mississippi State, Arkansas,
I'd probably go
Kentucky,
Kentucky, but
South Carolina. Like,
no,
there's a lot of
no.
flawed teams. Like, I mean, do you know that? I don't know that Mississippi State's better than South Carolina.
Yeah. You know what's
Kentucky,
interesting
South
is I think the
Carolina. I don't
SEC is
really.
the best. It's top heavy this year. Like the best of the best. Like I think the Tennessees, Georgias, Bamas, and LSU are significantly better than a lot of these other. And maybe Ole Miss. We'll see on Saturday.
And
But
when you
then
got
you go to
some
the
big, go ahead, go ahead.
well, then you go to the Pac-12. I think the Pac-12 is probably the deepest. The Pac-12. I mean, the collection
Yeah,
of UCLA, Utah, USC, Washington.
you didn't even say
You,
Oregon.
and Oregon, like they actually have a case to have the most. Like they have a cornucopia of 10-2 teams. It feels like
Yeah.
that. Look, they're really solid. I think the Pac-12 is up and the Big 12 is down across the board. I think the Big 10 is down.
Big 12 is just chaos. It's hard to even call it down. I don't know.
Kansas is going bowling, man. Like it's down. Like
Hey,
there's
Kansas
chaos
is up,
everywhere.
man. You better put some respect on Kansas's name. Oklahoma State's not looking too hot the last few weeks.
Oklahoma's
But
losing games. Like Texas has
yeah,
barely been ranked. Like no, I would say the Big 12 is definitely down this year.
it feels like the Big 12 at least. I don't know. It's just an exciting conference to watch. The Big 10 feels like you got two teams and nobody else. Like you have like a half of another team. Like I'll give you Penn State a little bit. It's like the Big 10 really doesn't. It's pretty top heavy as well. But yeah, I don't know. You got some of the big brands in the SEC like Florida, Auburn, A&M, all just not very good teams this year. Like that Florida Texas A&M game, like it was an exciting game to watch, but it's like it's so weird watching a game like this with just nothing on the line, like zero stakes in this Florida Texas A&M game. Like it's just I don't know. It was a weird game to watch. I mean, it was I don't know. It's not two teams we were expecting to be near the bottom of the SEC standings.
Speaking of being near the bottom, Matt Green, Miami gets absolutely obliterated by Florida State over the weekend, where this stat is bonkers. Miami's offense, so they lose 45-3. Miami has not scored a touchdown in 9 consecutive quarters now. This is Miami's 4th straight loss at home, their longest skid since 1973, Matt Green. This is unreal. Like what Miami's offense, and Tyler Van Dyke got hurt again in this one. They could not pass at all. On the flip side, Florida State, Jordan Travis having an all-time great year for the Noles. 16.6 yards per attempt. This game was over at the half. Trey Benson, another just sneaky dude for the Noles, ran all over the Hurricanes. But I mean, this is, look, I understand it's year 0 for Mario Cristobal and this new staff, but this is ugly. This is bad. And I don't know, man. Like if I'm a Miami fan, like you get Cormani McClain and you steal him away from Florida, you're like, the recruiting's coming, but you look at the actual coaching and like the inspired play and you're like, I don't know if this is going to, I think you're starting to feel a little Jimbo-y over here. You're feeling a little Texas A&M-y if you're a Miami fan right now. We're like, yeah, we're going to get the dudes, but are we sure this coaching staff is going to get the most out of these dudes? Dan Lanning's doing pretty well right away at Oregon. Mario Cristobal's got a lot of talent. The ACC is not good. And this Miami team's awful. Like, this Miami team is awful. What do you make of it?
I hate to put too much on a guy in year one, especially because Dan Lanning has taken over a program who was already near the top of the Pac-12 anyway, so Cristobal's going to a program who's in the gutter right now, and he's trying to take him out. But like Florida State hasn't even been scoring on anybody really this year. Like they've been solid. Like they look like they're trending in the right direction. But like to see them just open up a 45 spot, like I think Boston College and Georgia Tech are the only other teams that they've scored 40 against. Like this is like you said, this is bad, I believe, for your your terms there. It's just I don't know how Miami. I don't know. Like when Tennessee and programs like Tennessee, maybe in Nebraska, when they were bad, like obviously I'm sure you got some still shots of Neyland Stadium looking pretty empty at times, but for the most part, Tennessee fans were still there and like supporting their team. Like this Miami, this Hard Rock Stadium, seeing these games, it's just like a joke. Like there's just absolutely nobody there. I don't know. I don't know what is it's Miami looks like a big time fix. Like I know they got NIL money. I know Cristobal is doing a lot on the recruiting trail, but damn, it's like this. It's there's some hard results to ignore this year. Just getting absolutely the brakes beaten off you by teams like Duke and Middle Tennessee State and now Florida State. Like, oh man, I don't know. It's not looking good year one.
No. Also, we had K-State getting obliterated by Texas.
They lose by so like a one touchdown, like 34-27.
No, this is an obliteration. This was another one of those where Texas was in control of this one, especially early. Like, I guess you can give Kansas State some credit for coming back here a little bit, but Deuce Vaughn averaged, 3.8 yards per carry in this one. Bijan Robinson ran for over 200 on 30 carries. Xavier Worthy had one of the best touchdown catches I've ever seen this season. He had a ponkers route. Xavier Worthy is a dude, and just fantastic player for the Horns. But Quinn Ewers was perfect. This was 31-10 at the half, Matt Green. This one was over. Kansas State crawled back a little bit, but Texas, man, they're legit. Bijan Robinson outdueling Deuce Vaughn, and Texas is coming. That date against TCU this weekend, it's big time. There's a reason that Texas is a 7-point favorite at home for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that that Kansas State did come back, outscored Texas 17-3 in the second half. It does justify it does justify in a way leaving Adrian Martinez in the game, but I was kind of dumbfounded with how well Will Howard played for him to like not get any snaps in this game. Like it almost felt like I don't know if you remember last year when Georgia played South Carolina. It was coming off of the week off the UAB game where Stetson started because JT Daniels had the oblique or whatever. And he comes out and throws 5 touchdown passes, like National Player of the Week. It's like he played so well. It was like second or third possession of the game against South Carolina. Kirby got Stetson in there. Like, he earned it. Like, let him play a little bit. He threw a pick, I think, on that possession, but it wasn't great. And then JT Daniels kind of was the guy the rest of that game. But I felt like with his performance against Oklahoma State and the way the offense worked when he was in, it seemed like I don't know why you didn't have like a plan to, okay, Martinez is healthy, he's our guy, we're gonna give him back, but like, I mean, Will Howard is no slouch, so I was very confused on why they wouldn't give him any touches at all, but any snaps at all, really. And also like we were picking this game, like it wasn't a lot of X's and O's analysis on this game. It just felt like they just absolutely murdered Oklahoma State. I felt confident they weren't going to bring that performance 2 weeks in a row, and I feel like that's kind of who Kansas State is, and it was a letdown. But I kind of put a lot of this on the quarterback change coming in this week, personally.
Speaking of quarterback changes, Spencer Sanders out for the Oklahoma State Kansas game, and that was a problem for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Garrett Rangel, not a Yellowstone character, but also not a good quarterback to this point. Freshman didn't want him out there, and Jason Beam had a huge day. Kansas is going bowling. Bowl eligible in early November. Pretty wild stuff. Even after losing Daniels, who was having kind of a Heisman type campaign. So Devin Neal grew up like a mile away from KU. He has a huge day, 32 carries, 200 yards. I thought this was telling from the AP quote. The Cowboys scored a touchdown with 10 minutes left in the second quarter. Their first points in 83 minutes, spanning over their last 3 games. Bad times for the Cowboys.
Yeah, absolutely. The Sunflower State was not kind to the Cowboys. 2 straight losses, outscored was it 85-16 in those two games, I believe, to Kansas and Kansas State. And the last thing I'll say, the Uni Watch, the Uni Police, I should say, on this one. Kansas State, absolutely awful uniform. Or Kansas, absolutely awful uniform.
No, those were good.
These red pants.
No, those were good.
Not a fan.
Those were good.
Not a fan.
A rare L from Matt Green.
Honestly, I just can't take their uniforms seriously ever when they have that just cartoony Jayhawk on the side of their helmets. I just can't. Give me who is it? Who was Reesing? Todd Reesing, was that the quarterback?
You just want
give
the
me
KU?
That day, the KU Aqib Talib days. Yeah, just the KU. Give me that one.
No, the cartoon Jayhawk is top notch. Top notch. That is just a classless take.
Respectfully disagree, sir.
OU loses again. Baylor runs all over Oklahoma. Didn't matter that Blake Shapen had a really rough game. Oklahoma shut him down. Dylan Gabriel threw 3 picks. Just Baylor ran 5 TDs, ran all over them, and that's 3 straight wins for your Baylor Bears. Matt Green, are you thinking Big 12 title?
I have not ruled it out, sir. But man, have you seen this schedule? There are 4 teams now in contention. Really, we got TCU undefeated 6-0 in the conference. We got Texas, Baylor, and Kansas State all at 4-2 in the conference. Baylor's final 3 games just happened to be Kansas State at home, TCU at home, and then at Texas the final week of the season. So the Baylor Bears are in control of their own destiny, but they also have to play the other 3 best teams in the Big 12, and it's hard to see them running the table this way. But I'm squarely on the bandwagon, sir. I'm believing. I think they can. I think it's possible that they can get a berth here. I think they need a TCU win over Texas this week to help them out a little bit.
TCU, who we talked about a lot here, Morton goes down early in this one for Texas Tech, who's been really good for them. It seems like he's the guy. Tyler Shook has to come back in, and he has just a disaster in this one. Kendry Miller is a dude, man. He ran all over Texas Tech in this one for the Frogs. This coming from the AP. The Horned Frogs reached 9-0 for the first time since 2010, a 13-0 season that ended with a Rose Bowl victory and a number 2 national ranking. So keep that in your pocket if you're wondering if the Frogs are for sure going to go down.
Number 2?
Yeah.
Was that Andy Dalton?
That was Andy Dalton.
Okay.
Yeah. So big year for them. So it can be done. Like if you're just penciling in the Frogs losing a game, not so fast, my friend. Get well.
Were they in the Big 12? In 2010 though, or was that still like the Mountain West days? Do you know? I'm putting you on the spot there.
I'm not sure.
I have to get on that research.
I feel like that was like their first or second year in the Big 12. I feel like they had not been in long. I think they were in the Big 12.
I'll have to look at that because I know 2012 is when the SEC expanded, and so I know it was around that time. 2012 was the first year they were in the Big 12, so they were still in the Mountain West.
Okay.
In 2010.
Well, there you go.
But you had that year with Trayvon Boykin. 2014 went 12-1.
Yeah. That story did not end well. TCU has trailed, though, Matt Green, in the second half of 4 of its last 6 conference victories. That's the thing. Is like TCU is just hanging around with these teams week over week. Their offense is great. Their defense has been don't break. But, man, it's eventually going to come back to bite them. Texas Tech had a real shot at winning this game, and it was after losing their quarterback in this one. I don't know, man. Where are you at with TCU? Are you seeing enough where you're like, this is just going to fall, or do you think it's a dream season like 2010?
Oh, I got a new term that I'm trying to. Maybe we can start a hashtag. We can make this a thing. The Hypnotoads. That's catching on with TCU. I'm calling them the Pyro Toads because they like to play with fire, and each week, TCU, they are playing with fire. They have, like you said, with these second half, these second half deficits, it's gonna be a thing. Hashtag Pyro Toads. Put it on the board. But I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, man. Like it's hard to see them running the table because at Texas is going to be tough this week. But I mean, you look at the Longhorns and what they've done. Like we talk about them like they're like the clear best team in the Big 12, the clear most talented team in the Big 12. But like they haven't been that week in and week out. It's not like Ewers got healthy. It's like, oh yeah, now this team is who they are now that Ewers is healthy. Like Ewers has had some duds of games. Like so they haven't necessarily just brought their A game every week. I mean, it's obviously night game at home. Like it's going to be like a rowdy environment. And that's obviously going to be, I would say it's got to be TCU's toughest game of the season to this point. So it's not going to be easy, but I'm not just going to just count them out just because of the name brand, the name on the jersey. I think TCU is every bit as good as this Texas team. And for no other reason, just that they're kind of battle tested. Like they've been in a lot of these games and they found ways to win. And the offensive attack, they've just been so balanced this year. Like they run the ball well. Duggan is just, he's been the straw that stirs the drink, if you will. And I don't know. I'm not ready to say if you put a gun to my head, are they going to be undefeated the week that we're announcing the college football playoff? I'm probably picking against them to have at least one loss, but I'm not giving up on them just yet.
Okay. I like it. Who do we have left here? We have NC State Wake. So Wake goes down again, messing around with MJ Morris, true freshman under center for the Wolfpack. Doesn't matter. 3 TDs, no picks, 3 picks for Sam Hartman. Thought this was fascinating from the AP. NC State has won 16 straight home games. Coming after that Clemson mark, the new Clemson, many people are saying. 16 straight home games to tie the program record set from 1972 to 75 under Lou Holtz. Matt Green. Forgot Lou Holtz was the coach at NC State.
I had definitely forgotten that. Yeah, NC State, I feel like MJ Morris, this was a really surprising performance. I feel like ever since Devin Leary's gone down, I feel like it's just been inept quarterback play from NC State. And we've kind of joked week in and week out, like they're really still in the top 25. Like, why are we still doing this? Do people think they're a top 25 team? But you saw, more of what they're supposed to be. Like the defense forcing a bunch of turnovers. And MJ Morris making some plays, not only with his arm but with his legs too. So he's a Georgia guy, right? I want to say, is he from Carrollton? I remember question. he was a 4-star prospect coming out of high school.
We're high on him. He just wasn't supposed to play yet. Like he is Carrollton. He is a Carrollton Trojan. Good program down there.
Yeah, for sure. So NC State, I was glad. Like I joked before this one, like glad these two teams are playing together so we can kick one of these teams out of the top 25. Wake Forest just is not headed in the right direction right now. So good win for NC State. Also, this was the game on the pick'em. Oh, we haven't even gone through our pick'em.
I was waiting that for last. I was gonna just get through these and just wrap with that.
All right, that works.
Yeah, I haven't forgotten, Matt Green. We'll end on Washington on Friday. They survived. I told you, Matt Green, on the preview pod. Don't discount the weather. Raining in the Northwest. This was going to be a weird Friday night game. Never discount the weird Friday night games. Guess what? Power goes out late in this one. I don't know if you saw this. There was a power outage late in this game that lasted like an hour for Oregon State and Washington. So that game didn't end until like 3 a.m. East Coast time. It was a super late finish. But Oregon State almost pulls it out. They can't, like Washington, it took a 92-yard drive to set up the game-winning kick. Big drive for Michael Penix Jr., who's had a fantastic year for the Huskies. But Oregon State, they just can't throw. Worst passing grade of the season for the Beavs. And when you're all run, no pass against one of the best passing offenses in college football, you're going to run into a wall. Husky Stadium, no lights, all the rain, no dub for Mr. Jonathan Smith and his Beavers.
Yeah, I thought this was a good win for Washington. Like you pretty much covered it. This was the Friday night. I mean, you don't go on the road and beat teams on Friday night. You know, those weekday road games, they're tough. And I don't know. It just seems like so many of these teams, right? That just, what did they say? It's been like 20 years it felt like it shouldn't have been that long. Like 20 years since Oregon State's been ranked. Is that what I thought I heard him say on the telecast? And then like first game, number 23, go ahead and drop this one, get back out of the top 25. But yeah, good performance from Penix Jr. and good win for Washington.
That can't be right.
It can't be. Like I heard him say it because they said who the.
I know they made the college football playoff rankings for the first time ever this week. But
maybe that's what it is.
Maybe that's what it is. No way. There's just no way.
I'll tell you right now. Yeah, that is not correct. The last time they were ranked 25th back in 2013. They were as high as 7 back in 2012. So that was not correct. But it has been, I mean, that is a solid decade since they were last ranked. So, and I think that when they were 25 in the preseason and never got higher than 25. So I'm guessing they probably lost the opener that year and never were actually ranked. But yeah. So
there you go. I mean, they're moonlighting until they're before they're left behind with Washington State to the Mountain West, where they'll dominate for years to come.
Washington State, Oregon State. That's going to become the new rivalry. Just the redheaded stepchild or something. Like
no, you know what it is? The Left Behind series. Where's Kirk Cameron when you need him? The Left Behind series. Well, Matt Green, how do we do over the weekend? How did we do? What was the final tally this weekend?
Well, I'm a bit embarrassed now because I'm not able to pull up the sheet.
You brought it up.
I did. I don't have their season totals, but I do know how many games back and forward. So I did the math ahead of time, but I've lost access to this computer.
Yeah,
it's a whole thing. But your boy made up some ground this week, sir. I don't know if you were aware of this, but I went 7-4 overall and 7-4 against the spread. You, sir, went 4-7 overall and 4-7 against the spread. It was not your best week. So now on the season, I don't have the total numbers of the season, but I do know how many games back I am. I am now just 1 game back with 4 weeks left to play. I'm 1 game back against the spread and 7 games back overall. So,
oh, you're not coming back. I've got that on lock. I'm coasting. You know what's happening?
Well, with 3 weeks and then the conference championships, there's like 11, that's 33 games and maybe like 40 or so with the conference championship week. So 7 games with 40 games remaining. It's not insurmountable, sir.
Now is the time to follow through on what I've actually joked about as a bit. It's time to follow through with the bit to ensure it's time.
I would make you make all your picks first if that's how you're gonna roll.
You could do that. You could make me do it.
I think we might have to
for the integrity. You should probably do it just so I don't even have that instinct to be like, ooh, how many times have I gone away from Matt this week?
It's clearly already in your head. But yeah, you are. You're more like a New York Mets kind of guy. I'm the Atlanta Braves, just chasing you from behind. We're gonna catch you here. Got about 40 games left to play. I think that's about how many games back the Braves were with 40 games left to play. So we'll see.
The good thing is I don't see a Mr. Freeze or whatever he's called across the screen from me. I don't see you catching me in that same way.
Oh, I have speed, sir.
What's his name? The Freeze, Mr. Freeze.
Just the Freeze. But yeah.
Would you do it?
Oh, would you do it? Dude, I could beat the Freeze.
But would you do it in front of everybody? Would you be like the person? Would you run and do it on camera and do it for?
I 100% would. I would do it just because, like, I want to know how fast this man is. Like, it's just such a huge head start they give you. I feel like if you're a semi-athletic person with like a 30-yard head start, like surely you could beat him. But I don't know. I think Rennie Curran was out there, raced him.
Did he win?
And I think I want to say he barely got him. So Rennie Curran was a little bit better of an athlete than I was. So I don't know. But there's normal people that have beaten him before. But yeah, also along the lines of the pick'em, Zeus, NC State was his home dog of the week. That's his 3rd straight win for Zeus. 6-5 on the season.
Above 500.
Exactly. Also, shout out to Tori, who actually won the weekly pick'em in the group. And and among 15 people is in first place in the season standings. So I don't know what she's doing. I'm in like 6th place, and I feel like I know a good amount about college football.
Do y'all talk about your picks, or is she going blind every week?
Oh yeah, she's not completely blind because
No,
I
what I'm
feel
saying
like
is like she doesn't like discuss with you before. Like y'all do your picks separately, or is there some back and forth?
Actually, this last couple weeks, she's actually like done her picks like with me. I don't give her any knowledge. It's like an NCAA tournament bracket. Like I don't tell her what to do because I'm like, look, I don't know what's gonna happen. That's why you should just fill out some random shit because your random guesses might be better than my semi-educated guesses. But especially college basketball, I definitely don't know nearly as much about college basketball as I do college football. But yeah, so she honestly, she just absorbs everything I say. Like, I'm not really sure how she remembers everything I say, but so it's like my information is just locked in somewhere, and then she's got her own intuition on initials, mascots, whatever the case may be. Because TC, technically her first name is Victoria. I hope I didn't put her business out there, but she goes by Tori. Middle initial C, so TC. She's been picking TCU all year long.
Oh, wow.
And that's worked out well. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, she's in first place in the season standings. 3 weeks left to play for that one. Well, I guess 4 weeks because of conference championship as well. But yeah, it's looking good for her so far.
I like it. Helmet stickers as we wrap up here on a Sunday night. Matt Green. I've got 2 here. You've got 2 as well. I got Tanner Mordecai, who SMU just dropped a gazillion points on Houston and won that one in an unreal back and forth with the halftime score like added up to 100. Just an unreal game between the Cougs and the Mustangs. So Rhett Lashley's got that thing cooking where Sonny Dykes left off at SMU. But he gets one of mine, and then the other one I am giving it to Jalen Carter. As a classy guy that I am, I gave it to a Georgia Bulldog because he was unbelievable in this game. And also got kind of screwed. I'll tell you, he got screwed on the sack safety situation where I still will have no idea how that was not either a pass, incomplete pass, or a safety. The one thing they landed on, I didn't think was a possibility. Like I either thought they were going to say incompletion because I was like, that's like the Tom Brady tuck rule type thing. It looked like his arm was. I could see that being ruled.
No,
incomplete.
the Tom Brady tuck rule. Like I don't know what that was. Like the hooker. Like that was a legitimate like
throwing motion. It looked like
going forward or not. Yeah. Like you said, I forgot we didn't even talk about that. Yeah,
and then it ends up being a touchdown for Georgia anyway. So it actually worked out better for y'all that it was nothing and that we had to punt. And then you immediately score pretty quick after that. So
yeah, without doubt. It was either an incomplete pass or
a safety.
Or it was a safety. And it was set up by maybe the greatest punt I've ever seen. True freshman Australian. I don't want to butcher his name. I think Scott Thorson, I want to say is his name. But yeah, 75-yard punt went out right at the 1. Like that was an absurd play, I think, from the momentum perspective, because it was 7-3 at that time, and then Georgia punts on that drive, so they're backed up. I mean, I think he was standing on the 10 when he was punting that. So the fact that we were punting from deep and to knock Tennessee back like that, I think that ended up being a huge momentum play in the game. But yeah, Jalen Carter was an absolute beast. I gave one of my helmet stickers to just the whole Georgia defense in general because, man, this Tennessee team was were they averaging over 50 coming in this one? Was it 51 or 49 points a game coming in this game?
It was 49 point something. It was 50 the week prior, but they went down a little bit from the last week.
And to just get absolutely just shackled by this Georgia defense, I don't know who to give it to, really. Like you said, Jalen Carter and this defensive line was just creating so much pressure, but also the secondary, it seemed like half of those sacks were probably coverage sacks. So from the safeties, from the corners, from the star position, it just seemed like everything that this defense needed to do to shut down Tennessee's offense, that's exactly what they did. Playing on keeping it on Georgia, I got to give love to Stetson Bennett. I think Stetson Bennett was just his touchdown run. I felt like that was like the momentum that Georgia needed in this game. It feels like, not to be disrespectful of Stetson Bennett, but he's not the superstar player. He's not the Down syndrome kid on the team, right? Like the Down syndrome kid comes in and shoots some threes, like, and it's like this great heartfelt story, right? The kid who doesn't play at the end of the bench, he comes in and it's like, oh, the team goes crazy. It's not that extreme, but there is an element to that. It's like Stetson Bennett's running around making plays. It's like the whole team just eats it up, right? Like he broke that 70-yard run against Auburn, or how 60-yard run against Auburn for a touchdown. It was like the whole team celebrated like more excited than they would for if Kenny McIntosh broke a 60-yard run. It's like, yeah, that's a normal guy to make a play like this, but it's something about when Stetson Bennett is actually running around, improvising, making those plays. No disrespect to Down syndrome people out there. I hope I wasn't misconstrued. But the guy on the end of the bench, you kind of know what I'm saying. When the water boy kind of gets some ticks or something. It feels like it just has this kind of, the team rallies around Stetson because he does those intangible things. And I think he kind of brings an energy to this team. So rushing touchdowns, 6th rushing touchdown of the season. 2 passing touchdowns in this one. I thought Stetson was just amazing. And then also wanted to give love to my guy, like we said earlier, Drake May. It was just Virginia. Virginia hasn't really been good against anybody, but this guy, week in, week out, he's just absurd. Have you seen his numbers on the season?
I have not.
31 touchdowns, 3 picks, completing 71% of his passes. Also has 500 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns on the year. Like, this guy's a prototype. Like, he's the number 1 pick of the draft as far as I'm concerned. Like, if he came out next year with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, I feel like there'd be some conversation about him going like top 10. Like, I think Drake May is that good. He's the next superstar. I was a big Sam Howell guy, and I think he's head and shoulders better than Sam Howell, and he's only a true freshman. So Drake May, give him some love as well. North Carolina's defense is just plain bad. They didn't get necessarily torched in this one, but the offense basically carries them every single game. And Drake May's basically done that every single game with the whole team on his shoulders. So give me Drake May. And also last one, Jaden Daniels got the Greg Jennings Award this week because he put the team on his back, though. I don't know if you know that. You have to know that reference, right?
I know the reference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guess it just wasn't funny. You didn't laugh at all, so I wasn't sure.
It's just kind of old. It was just kind of it's a dated reference.
But yeah, Jaden Daniels, I feel like he balled out. He was the reason LSU got the win over Alabama. So yeah, another helmet sticker there.
With a broken freaking leg.
Yeah, Greg Jennings, man.
Yeah. Put the team on his back, though. You know, I remember.
Took on Darren Sharper, one of the hardest hitters in the league. But yeah.
There you go. Matt Green, always a pleasure. Congrats again on the victory. Here's to this being the last Georgia victory over Tennessee in any sport for another calendar year. That would be ideal. Basketball, women's basketball, men's basketball, women's basketball, men's baseball, softball, all the other sports that we look forward to. Yeah, we can have all of it. Let us have those, and you can keep football for the time being. Matt Green, always a pleasure, and I will talk to you in a couple days.
You're a class act, sir.